And we have some breaking news coming in for you as Israel and Iran continue to trade fire for the 5th consecutive day. WION Tehrani spoke to the Russian ambassador to UN, Vasily Nebenzya, on Russia's offer to mediate Israel-Iran war when asked about whether Russia has made arrangements to facilitate the evacuation of any Iranian government personnel or their families. The Russian envoy has said that he can neither confirm nor deny.
My question is, can you confirm or deny whether Russian officials have offered or made arrangements to facilitate the evacuation of any Iranian government official should tensions rise, and welcome them to Russia? And also, would Russia be open to such?
I can neither confirm or deny it. This is the first time I hear that.
The Russian envoy further goes on to say that Moscow has offered to mediate the war between Iran and Israel, but there does not seem to be an appetite for ceasefire right now.
The offer was indeed made, both by President Putin and by President Erdogan, but I don't see any appetite for mediation on the part of Israel, at least at this time, neither in 24 or in 48 hours. But these hostilities, this thing should be stopped because it has absolutely unpredictable consequences. Given that we are talking about nuclear sites that are under threat, and given that the ballistic exchange continues with the casualties, heavy casualties, and now on both sides.
And our correspondent Susan Tehrani is joining us live from the UN headquarters in New York. Susan, talk to us more about that conversation you had with the Russian ambassador, where he's clearly said that Russia has offered to mediate, but Israel and EU, they both have objected and they're reluctant for Russia's mediation in the Israel-Iran conflict.
Yeah, he was just verifying those reports that we have heard, and of course coming from U.S. President Donald Trump, that he had that discussion a few days ago with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, and that Putin was willing to mediate some sort of negotiated ceasefire to the war between Israel and Iran. Now, days have passed since that offer and that sort of mediation offer, so to say, and it appears that when asked here at the United Nations, the Russian ambassador said that, well, we made the offer, but it doesn't seem until now that there is an appetite. And then he added sort of afterwards, and notably from Israel. And the question that I asked, of course, was in the backdrop of those reports that as tensions flare up and the future of the Iranian government is in question at this point, there were reports from unknown Russian officials, anonymous officials, saying that Iranian high-ranking officials have already reached out to Russia to sort of provide some kind of safe corridor for them to exit Iran if things get worse and find a safe haven for them and their families. Of course, you heard the Russian ambassador here at the UN saying he can neither confirm or deny those reports at this time.
Right, Susan, the Russian ambassador, like you mentioned on your question, said that there's no appetite for a ceasefire at this point of time. Something which also the King of Jordan said that the war will go on for some time. Talk to us about where the situation is headed to right now, because Trump, in just a short while from now, will reach Washington, D.C. after he left the G7 summit, where he clearly said that he wants to meet the National Security Council in the Situation Room, and he said that something bigger is coming, but not a ceasefire.
Yes, President Trump also made those comments shortly after he put out a social media post saying that Iran should have negotiated, should have taken the deal and come to the negotiating table. And, you know, this was should have in past tense. It was the first time that we saw a post from the president saying that. Nonetheless, people close to him, as close as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, after he made those comments, and came back to Washington, said that the doors of negotiation are still open with Iran should Iran decide to come to the negotiating table. Of course, we have not heard from the Iranian sides. We only have unconfirmed reports that Iran is reaching out to Arab intermediaries, hoping to reach the ears of Israel and the United States. But nonetheless, later on the plane, as he was heading back to Washington, we heard President Trump being very clear-eyed, saying that he doesn't have an appetite for talks either at this point. Now, whether or not he received new intelligence, there were more reports, but something had to sort of evolved for him to, first of all, leave the G7 so early. And second of all, as you mentioned, as we're speaking right now, he's meeting with his National Security Council team. Again, everything is happening so fast. Let me just bring our viewers up to date that we are seeing many American aircraft carriers heading to the Middle East. This does not mean necessarily that the United States wants to get involved. It does mean, however, that the president and CENTCOM need to have options in the regions should the situation get out of hand or the United States decides in some form to take any action. Yeah.
Right, Susan, thanks for joining us on the show. That was the correspondent Susan Tehrani joining us live from the UN headquarters in New York.